Alex stood among the sea of graduates, his cap resting lightly on his head, the gown hanging loosely around his frame. He felt the mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through him as the graduation ceremony was about to begin. It was a day he had dreamed of for so long, a culmination of years of hard work and late nights. But as much as this day was about him, his thoughts were not on the ceremony or the speeches ahead. He scanned the crowd restlessly, his eyes darting between the rows of parents and families seated in the auditorium. He was searching for one person, his mother. The proud smiles of his classmates' parents and the neatly pressed suits and dresses caught his attention. But still, he couldn't find her. His heart pounded with a slight fear that she might not make it. He knew how hard she had worked that day, scrubbing floors and cleaning rooms in wealthy homes just to make ends meet. Her job was physically demanding, and she often came home exhausted, her body sore from the endless tasks. But she had promised she'd be there no matter what. Just as the principal began speaking, Alex caught a glimpse of movement near the back of the auditorium. There she was, his mother, slipping quietly through the doors, trying not to attract attention. She was still in her work clothes, an old, faded shirt with stains from her cleaning job, and worn-out shoes that had seen too many days of labor. Her hair was a little disheveled, likely from rushing straight from work, and her hands were still slightly stained from the cleaning products. But despite her appearance, she was there. Relief washed over Alex, but it quickly shifted to another emotion as he noticed the glances from people sitting near her. Some of the other parents turned their heads, their eyes scanning her up and down with judgment. He could hear the faint murmurs from his classmates, snickering or making quiet comments about the woman in the back who didn't look like she belonged. His heart sank, knowing how they were judging her based on her appearance, without knowing anything about her or the sacrifices she had made to get him to this moment. But Alex also felt something else: pride. His mother had come straight from her job, tired and dirty, but she had made it in time. She had always done whatever it took for him, working long hours without complaint, sacrificing her own comfort so that he could have a chance at a better life. In that moment, Alex felt a surge of gratitude and love for her that overshadowed the embarrassment he might have once felt about her appearance. He didn't care about the whispers or the judgmental stares from those who didn't understand. She was here, and that was all that mattered. As the ceremony continued, Alex's eyes never strayed far from his mother. He watched as she found a seat in the back row, trying to blend in, her face tired but full of pride. She sat quietly, clapping politely along with the other parents, her gaze fixed on her son. The moment felt surreal for Alex. This was a day of celebration, yet the sting of judgment from others hung in the air like a shadow. Still, the love between him and his mother was stronger than any of the opinions in that room. When the principal began calling names for the graduates to receive their diplomas, Alex felt a rush of nerves again, not because of the ceremony, but because of what he was about to do. He knew that today wasn't just about his achievements. It was about honoring the person who had made them possible. As the graduation ceremony unfolded, Alex's heart raced with a mix of emotions. He had been waiting for this day for years, the culmination of his hard work and dedication. But now the moment was overshadowed by something else: his mother. He could see her at the back of the auditorium, quietly settling into a seat. She stood out, not just because she was late, but because of her appearance. Her clothes were stained and worn, her hair tousled from a long day of work. She had come directly from her job as a house cleaner, and it showed. She didn't have the luxury of going home, showering, and dressing up like the other parents. Alex's eyes were glued to her, but it wasn't long before he noticed something that made his stomach twist. The people around her, other parents, well-dressed in their tailored suits and designer dresses, began to glance her way. Their gazes were fleeting at first, then longer, lingering with thinly veiled judgment. A few whispered among themselves, their expressions betraying disdain as they took in the sight of her worn-out appearance. Alex could hear snippets of their hushed conversations. "Did you see her? She looks like she just walked off a construction site. Why would someone come to graduation looking like that? Probably didn't even care enough to dress up for her own son." Each word was like a punch to the gut, his heart sinking lower with every cruel comment. A pang of embarrassment shot through him, and for a fleeting moment, he felt ashamed. Not of his mother, but of the fact that she was being judged for something she had no control over. She had come straight from work, doing the job that allowed him to stand on that stage, and all these people could see was her outward appearance. His fists clenched at his sides as the whispers around the auditorium grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. The judgment wasn't just confined to the parents. Some of his classmates were smirking, pointing discreetly in her direction. The look of superiority in their eyes was unmistakable. They didn't know her story. They didn't know the countless nights she had come home, barely able to stand, after scrubbing floors and washing windows for wealthy families, just like theirs. They didn't know how she had saved every penny to make sure Alex could have new clothes for school, a roof over his head, and food on the table. Alex's mind flashed back to all those nights. He remembered her coming home late, her hands red and raw from cleaning chemicals, her shoulders sagging under the weight of exhaustion. He remembered her quiet smile, the one she forced on her face even when she was too tired to speak, just to make sure he didn't worry about her. He remembered the way she would sit at the kitchen table late at night, paying bills, her face etched with concern, but never once complaining. Every single sacrifice she made was for him, for his future, for this moment right now. And here she was, despite everything, showing up to his graduation, just like she had promised. His embarrassment was quickly replaced by a simmering anger. How could they judge her? How could they look down on her for being exactly who she was, a hardworking, selfless woman who had given everything for her son? They didn't know the lengths she had gone to just to make sure he had the opportunities they took for granted. As Alex sat there waiting for his name to be called, his mind raced. His chest tightened with the weight of the moment. He could feel the pressure of the whispers, the judgmental stares from the audience, pressing down on him. He had always known that his mother's work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It was grueling, thankless work, and she did it with pride because it was what kept them afloat. But now, sitting among people who had never known a day of struggle in their lives, Alex felt a sense of helplessness and frustration. The principal's voice droned on, calling student after student up to the stage, but Alex barely registered the names. His mind was too preoccupied with the scene playing out in the back of the auditorium. He watched as his mother sat quietly, her eyes fixed on him, completely oblivious to the looks and whispers around her. She had no idea that people were judging her for the simple act of showing up. To her, this moment wasn't about appearances or social status. It was about being there for her son, no matter what. The auditorium was full of parents who had likely never worked a day of manual labor in their lives, who had the luxury of sending their kids to private tutors and extracurriculars while someone else cleaned their homes and cooked their meals. They couldn't possibly understand what it was like for his mother. They couldn't understand the pride she must have felt just to see him walk across that stage, knowing that every late night and early morning had led to this moment. As the whispers continued, Alex's anger simmered beneath the surface. But so did something else, a fierce determination. He had always admired his mother, but now, in this moment of judgment and scorn from others, he felt a new sense of pride in her. She wasn't like them, and that's what made her extraordinary. She didn't care about what people thought of her appearance. All that mattered was being there for her son. Finally, his name was called. "Alexander Daniels," the principal announced, and the crowd clapped politely as Alex rose from his seat. His heart pounded in his chest as he made his way toward the stage, but his thoughts weren't on the diploma he was about to receive. They were on the speech he had prepared, the one he was about to deliver in front of all these people. As he climbed the steps and stood before the microphone, he glanced at the crowd. His eyes found his mother once more, sitting in the back, her tired face glowing with pride. She had no idea what was coming next. No one did. Alex took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would silence every whisper, every judgmental look, and every word spoken in ignorance. He would use this moment not just to celebrate his achievements, but to honor the woman who had made them all possible. As Alex took his place at the podium, the usual noise of a graduating crowd filled the auditorium, shuffling feet, rustling programs, scattered conversations. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and relief as the students, one by one, were called to the stage to receive their diplomas. But now, as Alex stood under the bright stage lights, the murmurs quieted, replaced with an expectant hush. The eyes of the audience, once scattered in all directions, were now on him. Most of his classmates expected the usual graduation speech, some lighthearted jokes, a sprinkling of gratitude for the teachers and school staff, and maybe a motivational nod to their collective futures. After all, wasn't that what every speech was supposed to be? A highlight reel of shared moments, something fun and uplifting before they all scattered into the world? But Alex had something different in mind. As he gripped the sides of the podium, his mind was racing, but not with anxiety. He had thought long and hard about this moment, knowing exactly what he needed to say. His heart pounded in his chest, not from nerves, but from the weight of the truth he was about to deliver. His eyes scanned the crowd once more, passing over rows of familiar faces, until he found her, his mother. She sat in the very back, just as she had since arriving late, her dirty clothes still damp from a long day's work. Despite the weariness that tugged at her features, there was a glow of pride in her eyes as she watched her son stand on the stage, preparing to speak. She didn't know what was coming. No one did. The crowd waited, expecting the usual. Alex took a breath, and then, instead of launching into the traditional speech about mentors, friends, and future dreams, he began with something else. I know I'm supposed to stand here and talk about school, the years we've spent together, and all the memories we've made, Alex began, his voice strong, but filled with something deeper than excitement. But before I get to that, there's someone I need to thank. Someone who is more responsible for me standing here today than anyone else in this room. He paused for a moment, and the audience stirred slightly, curious about where he was going with this. Some of his classmates shifted in their seats, expecting him to name a favorite teacher or coach. But Alex wasn't looking at them. His eyes remained fixed on his mother. I want to talk about my mom, he said, his voice steady. She's sitting in the back, and she might not look like the other parents here today. Her clothes are dirty because she came straight from work. She didn't have time to go home and change, and she's probably exhausted because she's been cleaning houses all day. But she's here, and that's what matters. The auditorium fell into complete silence. The casual shuffling of feet, the rustling of programs, all of it stopped as the audience's attention sharpened on him, his words hanging in the air like a weight that no one expected. Alex's mother, still seated in the back, blinked, a look of confusion and surprise crossing her face. She hadn't expected to be mentioned, certainly not in front of an entire crowd of students, teachers, and parents. Alex continued, his voice now carrying the full weight of emotion he had kept bottled up for years. I know some of you might have noticed her when she walked in, he said, his tone unwavering. Maybe you judged her because she wasn't dressed like everyone else's parents. Maybe you whispered things or gave her looks. I saw them. I heard them. But what none of you know is that my mom is the reason I'm standing here today. She's the reason I was able to graduate at all. The room was still, as though the entire audience had collectively held its breath. The whispers and judgments that had filled the space earlier seemed to vanish, replaced by a growing tension as people realized this was not going to be the speech they expected. For as long as I can remember, my mom has worked harder than anyone I've ever known, Alex continued, his eyes never leaving her face. She cleans houses for a living. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. But she does it every day without complaint because she wanted to give me a life she never had. There were nights when she came home so tired she could barely stand, her hands raw from scrubbing floors, her body aching from hours of hard labor. And yet, she would still find the energy to ask me about my day, to help me with my homework, to make sure I had what I needed. His mother's eyes began to glisten with tears, her lips trembling as she listened to her son's words, realizing that he had seen and understood everything she had done for him. She had never expected to be the subject of his graduation speech. There were days, Alex continued, his voice thickening with emotion, when I thought I wouldn't make it. Times when I wanted to give up, when the pressure felt like too much. But every time I felt like I couldn't do it, I thought about my mom. I thought about how hard she was working to make sure I could succeed, and I knew I had no right to give up because she never did. By now, many in the audience were visibly moved. The parents who had been whispering earlier, casting judgmental glances at Alex's mother, were now sitting in silence, their faces softened with understanding. Even his classmates, who had smirked and whispered among themselves, were now riveted by his words, their expressions shifting from indifference to quiet awe. "I know she doesn't want the spotlight," Alex said, his voice softer now but still clear. "She never asked for recognition. But today, I need to give it to her, because without her, none of this would be possible. She's the strongest person I know, and everything I've achieved is because of her sacrifices." The silence in the auditorium was deafening. Alex's words had reached everyone, their impact undeniable. His mother, now openly crying, held her hand to her mouth as she tried to process the depth of her son's gratitude and love. She had always been proud of him, but hearing him speak about her like this, in front of so many people, made her realize that all her struggles had been worth it. "I'm not embarrassed by her," Alex said, his voice stronger now as he addressed the entire room. "I'm proud of her, proud that she's my mom, proud of everything she's done for me. And if anyone here can't see that, then you don't know what real strength looks like." The weight of his words settled over the audience like a heavy blanket, wrapping them in the undeniable truth of his message. In that moment, the whispers, the judgment, the disdain, all of it seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the love and admiration Alex had for his mother. The room was no longer filled with shallow judgment, but with a deep, resonating respect. When Alex finished speaking, he stepped back from the podium, his heart pounding with the emotion of the moment. The crowd, once so quick to judge, now sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. And then slowly at first, one person began to clap, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire auditorium erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping that typically followed a graduation speech. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and filled with admiration. The applause wasn't just for Alex, it was for his mother, for the sacrifices she had made, and for the courage it took for him to stand up and tell the world how much she meant to him. Alex's mother, still seated in the back, wiped away her tears, her heart swelling with pride. She had never felt so seen, so appreciated. For years, she had worked tirelessly in the background, always putting Alex first, never asking for recognition. But today, her son had given her the greatest gift she could have ever asked for: his gratitude, his love, and his public acknowledgement of everything she had done for him. As the applause continued to echo through the auditorium, Alex stepped down from the stage, his eyes still locked on his mother. He made his way toward her, the applause growing louder with every step. And when he reached her, he didn't say a word. He just pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the crowd cheered on, knowing that this moment wasn't just about a graduation. It was about a love that had overcome every hardship, every obstacle, and every judgment. As Alex stood at the podium, the stage lights glaring down, he took a deep breath, his heart pounding not from nerves, but from the significance of what he was about to say. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, as hundreds of faces stared back at him, waiting for him to begin. He could feel the weight of their expectations. After all, this was the moment every valedictorian was supposed to shine, to deliver a speech that inspired their peers, to talk about the future, their accomplishments, and the challenges they had overcome together. But Alex had something different in mind. His gaze swept across the sea of faces in the audience, his classmates, their families, the teachers, and the school administrators, all waiting. But Alex wasn't focused on them. His eyes searched the back of the auditorium, where his mother sat quietly, her tired face still glowing with pride. She hadn't expected to be a part of this moment. In fact, she had come here trying to blend into the background, trying not to draw attention to herself. Her work-worn clothes and weary appearance were a stark contrast to the polished attire of the other parents. But she was here, and that was all that mattered to Alex. Finally, his eyes locked onto hers. The rest of the world faded away, and in that moment, it was just the two of them. "I'd like to start this speech," Alex began, his voice steady and clear, "by talking about someone very important to me, someone who has made it possible for me to be standing here today." The room quieted even more, if that was possible. The usual graduation speeches started with jokes about school or reflections on the teachers and classmates, but Alex had taken an unexpected turn. Curiosity rippled through the audience as they leaned in, eager to hear who this special person was. Alex paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he continued, his voice filled with emotion. I know everyone here has someone they're grateful for. Someone who helped them get through the tough times, who supported them when things got hard. For me, that person is my mom. His mother blinked, a look of surprise flickering across her face. She hadn't expected him to mention her. She had spent years working behind the scenes, making sacrifices in silence, always focused on giving Alex the best future possible. The crowd's attention shifted toward the back of the room, and all eyes were on her now as Alex spoke. My mom, he said, his voice growing more confident, is sitting in the back, and she might not look like the other parents here today. She's not dressed in fancy clothes. She didn't have time to go home and get changed because she came straight from work. You see, my mom cleans houses for a living. She works long hours, day after day, to make sure I had everything I needed, and she never once complained. A murmur of recognition passed through the crowd. The same people who had whispered about her appearance earlier, who had judged her for her disheveled look, were now beginning to understand. The room began to shift from casual indifference to something deeper, a quiet reverence as they realized who she was and what she had done. There were nights when she came home so tired she could barely stand, Alex continued, his voice tightening with emotion. Her hands would be raw from scrubbing floors, her body aching from hours of hard work. But no matter how tired she was, she always smiled when she walked through that door. She always asked me how my day was. She always made sure I had dinner on the table and that my homework was done. She always made time for me, no matter how much she was sacrificing. Alex's words cut through the room like a knife, slicing through the superficial judgments that had lingered earlier in the day. The audience sat in stunned silence, their earlier whispers and glances replaced by a growing understanding of the gravity of his words. Parents shifted in their seats, some of them visibly moved, while students looked at each other with new appreciation for the weight of the story Alex was sharing. And I know, Alex said, his voice trembling slightly as he fought to keep his emotions in check, that there were times when she felt like she wasn't enough, when she thought she wasn't doing enough for me. But she was wrong. She gave me everything. Every night when she came home exhausted, she gave me the strength to keep going, because I knew that if she could keep fighting, then I had no excuse not to. Every success I've had, every achievement, is because of her. Tears welled up in his mother's eyes and she wiped them away quickly, as if embarrassed to be the focus of such attention. She had spent so many years blending into the background, working in the shadows, never asking for recognition. But now, here was her son, standing on stage in front of hundreds of people, giving her the credit she had never sought. I know, Alex continued, his voice breaking slightly, that sometimes we judge people by what we see on the surface. We look at their clothes, their appearance, and we make assumptions. But my mom, she taught me that true strength doesn't come from the clothes you wear or the car you drive. It comes from what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. And my mom, she sacrificed everything. The room was utterly silent now. Even the air seemed to still as Alex's words hung in the space between him and the audience, filling it with a palpable emotion. Tears brimmed in the eyes of more than a few people. Some of Alex's classmates wiped their faces, while others stared at him with newfound respect. The parents in the crowd, those who had whispered about his mother, who had judged her for her appearance, sat motionless, their earlier judgments erased by the raw power of Alex's words. I know she doesn't want to be in the spotlight, Alex said, his voice softening. She never asked for recognition. She's the kind of person who works hard in silence, always giving and never asking for anything in return. But today, I need to say this, because I wouldn't be who I am without her. Everything I've achieved, it's because of her. So, Mom, he said, his voice breaking completely now, I love you, and I'm so, so proud of you. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the teachers and school staff, hardened by years of hearing similar speeches, were visibly moved. The atmosphere had shifted completely, from a standard graduation ceremony filled with routine speeches to a deeply emotional moment that touched everyone in the room. "And now," Alex said, stepping back slightly from the podium, "I'd like to ask my mom to come up here, because she deserves to stand in the spotlight for once. She deserves to be seen for everything she's done." His mother's eyes widened in shock. She shook her head slightly as if to say, "No, this isn't my moment." But Alex wasn't taking no for an answer. He beckoned her forward, his hand outstretched. And after a moment of hesitation, she stood. The crowd watched in awe as she slowly made her way to the front, her hands trembling slightly as she walked down the aisle. Every step was a testament to the years of hard work and sacrifice she had endured to give her son this moment. And as she reached the stage, the entire room erupted into applause. But this wasn't just any applause. This was a standing ovation, a thunderous, heartfelt expression of admiration for a woman who had done so much with so little and asked for nothing in return. The applause wasn't just for Alex's speech. It was for the woman who had inspired it, the mother who had worked tirelessly to give her son a future. As she stood beside him on the stage, Alex wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as the crowd continued to cheer. Tears streamed down her face, and for once she allowed herself to be seen, to be recognized for all the sacrifices she had made. And in that moment, under the bright lights of the stage, with the applause of hundreds ringing in her ears, she realized that all her hard work, all her sacrifices, had been worth it. Because her son had made it, and he had never forgotten who helped him get there. The applause seemed to last forever, echoing through the auditorium as Alex and his mother stood side by side. The moment was theirs, a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. As the applause finally began to die down, Alex leaned in and whispered in his mother's ear, his voice filled with emotion, "This is your moment, Mom. You deserve it." And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe it. As Alex's mother slowly made her way to the stage, the room, once filled with silent judgment and whispers, erupted into applause. The sound swelled, growing louder with every step she took toward her son. For a moment she hesitated, still unsure if the ovation was for her. Her hands trembled as she clutched the strap of her worn-out bag, her face flushed with emotion. The dirt on her clothes and her disheveled appearance no longer mattered. The ovation grew even stronger, a symbol of respect and admiration, a far cry from the sneers she had faced earlier. Alex stood tall at the podium, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears, waiting for her with outstretched arms. His mother, Maria, finally reached the stage, and when their eyes met, the years of sacrifice, struggle, and love all came rushing to the surface. Her lips quivered as a tear rolled down her cheek. She had always dreamed of this day, but never in her wildest imagination had she thought it would be like this. Center stage with hundreds of eyes on her, not in pity or disdain, but in awe of her dedication. As Maria reached her son, Alex wrapped her in a warm, tight embrace. He held her close, as though saying through that hug all the words he couldn't fit into his speech. The applause crescendoed again, and Alex kissed his mother's forehead before turning back to the microphone, still holding her hand. "I want everyone here to see what real strength looks like," Alex began, his voice stronger now, full of conviction. "This is the woman who worked multiple jobs, who cleaned houses, and sacrificed everything just so I could be standing here today. This dirt on her clothes, this isn't something to hide. It's a badge of honor, a sign of her unwavering love and strength. Every single sleepless night, every aching muscle, every tear she hid from me was for this moment." The audience sat in stunned silence, many wiping their eyes as they listened to his words. Even the professors and dignitaries seated behind Alex nodded solemnly, their expressions no longer ones of indifference, but of deep respect. "My mother taught me the value of hard work," Alex continued, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "She taught me that success isn't about how much money you have or what kind of clothes you wear. Success is about the people who stand by your side, who believe in you when no one else does. I wouldn't be here without her." As he spoke, Maria stood beside him, her face a mix of pride, disbelief, and overwhelming love. The ovation was now filled with the sounds of people standing, some cheering, others clapping with renewed vigor. What had begun as a moment of potential shame for her, walking into the auditorium in dirty clothes, had transformed into one of the proudest moments of her life. Alex turned to her again and said, "Mom, today I graduate because of you. You are the reason for my success, and I am forever grateful." Tears streamed freely down Maria's face as Alex gently guided her toward the center of the stage. The two of them stood there, mother and son, under the bright lights, united by love, sacrifice, and a bond that no amount of judgment could ever sever. He raised his arm in a final gesture, inviting the audience to understand what truly mattered in life. "No matter where you come from or what struggles you faced," he said, his voice resonating through the hall, "it's the people who stand beside you in your hardest moments that matter the most. You might see dirt on someone's clothes, but you have no idea the strength behind it." The audience erupted into cheers again, this time not just for Alex, but for the lesson that had touched every heart in the room. Maria's clothes were no longer a symbol of her poverty or exhaustion. They had become a powerful statement of perseverance and love. Every thread, every stain, told a story of the sacrifices she made. And now, those sacrifices were being celebrated by all. As the ceremony continued, people looked at Maria not with pity, but with respect. Her once worn and weary frame now radiated pride, and her humble beginnings were no longer a source of shame, but a symbol of strength for everyone who witnessed that day. When Alex and his mother left the stage, the world seemed brighter, kinder. The judgment had disappeared, replaced with a profound sense of admiration and the understanding that true wealth is found in the people who love and sacrifice for you, no matter the cost. The graduation ceremony would go on to be remembered as not just a celebration of academic achievement, but as a powerful reminder of the strength of love, family, and the true meaning of success. Maria had always been proud of her son, but in that moment, surrounded by applause and respect, she knew that Alex had become not just a graduate, but a man who truly understood the value of his roots, and in her heart, she had never been more proud. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the story and share any themes or ideas you'd like to hear in future stories. Your feedback means the world to me. Thanks for watching.